Welcome back to Project Fast Fish here on Mike's Motorworks, and it is the 4th of July weekend. We are celebrating America's independence with her 250th birthday, and I'm doing the best I know how to do. We're going to create a little bit of spark today, and then we're going to get this thing ready exterior-wise for its final coat of epoxy primer before we get it ready for sealing. You don't want to miss it, and man, it is hot out here. As I've talked about before, this isn't the most perfect environment to restore a car in, let alone try to paint a car in. And even a DIY house paint needs some special environmental considerations, right? So on that note, and knowing based off of my skill, I'm going to leave a majority of the final paint to a professional. And that's where I know that my skills kind of have ran out at. Again, you got to know thyself, right? And you know, if you know that your skills can't compensate for, well, the environment, let alone the skill of something you've never tried before, it might be best to take a professional on. Now, there are some paint elements we can take care of in this environment because it is just epoxy primer and some sealer, and any imperfections can be, well, sanded away, if you will, right? So I'm not too worried about the environment for those keyboard guys out there, okay? Yeah, I know it's dirty in here. Yeah, it's filthy. It's a garage in the country. It is what it is, all right? But with that note, I have yet to put epoxy primer on some of the important panels of the car. Now, those that have been following the channel and following the build, by the way, I'll leave a playlist above for you, and I hope I'm pointing to the right side there. But you can follow it from the beginning. But you know that I started off with priming the front of the car, the apron, the inside, the trunk area, before I laid the Herculiner and all that good stuff, right? And I even primed the upper top of the roof in here before I applied the thermal control. Now it's time to bring our attention to the outside here, okay? And there's a lot of extra debris that just needs to be sanded off, and this is still in its EDP coating, so that could be sanded off. Now, some guys will go as far as removing it. I'm not gonna go that far. I'm gonna sand it and scuff it because I believe that most of the metal should be good in here, and once it's sealed with epoxy primer, we should be fine, okay? But I need to get the roof sanded, I need to get the quarters sanded, I need to get the sail panel sanded, and there's one additional weld I need to take care of back there. I'll show you that in a minute. I need to go ahead and take care of the trunk deck that's been sealed a while ago, the rear tail panel and such. So those all will be sealed when all is said and done. Additionally, I'm gonna go ahead and put an extra coat right here in the door jambs and in the upper roof rails up here, okay? So those are going to be taken care of. Now, I've already gone through and put some seam sealer in certain locations, so you will see that as I'm kind of painting, right? I even put some up here because I just used some of that Rattle Cate and primer to seal it up here, that Rattle Cam 2K up in this area. But I sanded it down and such, and then applied our seam sealer to the joints and the seams. And so now we can go ahead and put that final harder 2K epoxy primer on the car itself. So the next thing that you're going to see me do is two things. One, I'm going to show you immediately here in a minute a little weld I got to take care of. And then two, I'm going to go ahead and start doing a time lapse of the sanding process here. Now, because it is so warm, I'm only going to prep today. I am not going to paint today because it's going to be too hot by the time all is said and done to get that primer on here and allow it the time it needs to cure and adhere to the car. However, I'll be up first thing in the morning, 4th of July, giving this thing a coat of paint while it's still about 77, 75 in the garage. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, on that weld, I don't know if you could see it right here, but there are two little dings, if you will, right? And those dings really aren't dings, they're cuts. I was a little too aggressive with the cutoff wheel when I went to go install the sail panel, and I used the cutoff wheel because I needed the sail panel to kind of flare out a little bit. So I cut some of the bracket or the bracing inside there to kind of get it to match the quarter joint here, right? So, or quarter seam, if you will. So I got a little spot there that needs to be ground down and a little spot there that needs to be ground down. And I'm going to go ahead and fill it with just a little tack, grind it, and it should make it good. Now, why haven't I put seam sealer on there yet? Well, hello, I haven't put the epoxy primer on there. Now, some would argue that, hey, you can go ahead and put the seam sealer direct to metal, and that's fine. I am going to go ahead and do epoxy first, then finish with the seam sealing. Remember, the other areas that are already seam sealed have the epoxy primer on there. That's why I haven't done this part just yet. So let's go ahead and get that taken care of, and then we will go ahead and we'll do that in time lapse, and then we'll go ahead and start standing in time lapse. And yeah, I'm going to turn some fans on. It is 4th of July weekend, and man, it is absolutely hot. And as you can see, I've been doing some painting on the car here. And I wanted to take a quick time out to talk a little bit about our product that we used here. Now, as I said previously, I'm going to leave a link above so that you can get a more detailed set of information for what I'm using. But in a brief synopsis here, I am using Eastwood's Epoxy Primer Direct to Metal Low VOC. It's a 2-part formula, all right? It's super easy to use. It is a little thick, so make sure your gun can handle the thicker materials or the thicker components for the epoxy, because man, it is thick, and you want to make sure that you have a lot coming out of that nozzle, or else it'll gum up on you. I would say you could thin it out, and you can thin it out with some xylene, but yeah, make sure that it's applied with the right pressure and such. It's a simple, easy to use 1-to-1 mix, which is really easy on your mixing cup. You just simply find your 1 point, go to your desired level, alrighty? So 1-to-1, all right, there's your 1, and then you would make it 2 to make it 1-to-1, and super simple like that. And of course you got different levels. All you gotta do is just match your next level, and you got your 1-to-1 based off of your gun. Now, as far as what you saw me doing as well as I was wiping down, I was using nothing but xylene, and my xylene was in this container right here. This is from Harbor Freight. You can get these pretty much anywhere. Commercial department from AutoZone or Advanced or O'Reilly's. They'll have a different name on there, but they're all the same thing. They're basically a pressurized container, and you put your chemicals in here. Now, in this one, I'm going to use nothing but xylene in the future. That means if I want to use something else, I'm going to have to get a separate container, because you don't want those chemical compounds mixing if you don't want them. All right. And of course, as you guys know, if you could thin with it, you can mix with it, right? So it works really good with the epoxy primer here. Now, one last thing, you do want to make sure that you use something like a paint shaker like this guy right here. I'll zoom in with the camera settings, post-production here, but you want to use something like this to shake your materials, because the epoxy primer is going to be really, really thick. It's going to involve a lot of mixing. So shaking it becomes so much easier, especially if you're dealing with larger amounts. Now, you can use a stir stick, absolutely, all right? But this sure does taking cans in your hand and just trying to shake it really fast, getting yourself tired and looking silly, all right? One of these can be purchased from Amazon and eBay and so on and so forth. I happen to have off-brand here because it was just inexpensive, and I don't use it that well. Mine comes on a mount on a plate. When I get my garage in the future, I will put this on a wall, but for now, it just goes on my bench top. You spend your weekends under the hood. You've got grease under your fingernails. You've been spending time under the car in your driveway, and you're the guy who probably has a secondary living room in their garage as opposed to, well, the real thing in their house. Mike's Motorwear is apparel and gear for people just like you. Guys who work on their cars, who live the culture, gearheads, mechanics, people using their hands to build their dreams. Now, we're talking about shirts, hats, gear, and other stuff that says, hey, there's no fluff here, no corporate slogans, no corporate crap in the background, just real designs for real car people made by a car guy, all right? So check us out on Etsy. That's Mike's Motorwear. I'll even leave the address right here. If you're a gearhead who's proud of it, show off that vibe. Get the gear that fuels your soul. So this guy went ahead and got a little bit ahead of himself and got some goodies from various suppliers, Amazon and what have you. And I bought something else, but I want to save that for a little bit later. So let's start off with this stuff over here, and I'm going to explain the big black box over here. All right, so when I've been sanding the body, the sheet metal, and the epoxy primer, I've been using nothing more than a 150 and 180 grit sandpaper. Absolutely okay with the epoxy primer because it's so thick. More on that in a minute. But I wanted to go ahead and get something I could scuff up for whatever coat we need in the future, and so I went ahead and bought some 240 grit as well, just standard sticky pads. Over here we got some stuff that I'm going to use to help cut in and make lines really, really pretty with. So this is no more than super thin 3M green tape. And of course I got some pre-taped masking paper over here to help block out certain areas for our Raptor liner and other things in the future. I also got some plastic, but that's too big to hold up here. Over here, we got spray cans of Prep-All, which is really nice to see. I decided that this was the better option, other than buying a whole can and another spray can like the red Maddox can you saw me use with the xylene in it. This is just a much better option for what I'm going to be using it for immediately, but in the future that may change. And of course, for our seam sealer on the outside, I've been using the urethane seam sealer here from 3M. You can see that part number, and it's in black. Now this is different than the solvent-based seam sealer I use from 3M that I use on the inside, which is absolutely okay on the inside. And of course, some tack cloths. Now, I don't know if you saw it, but when I was painting the epoxy primer on the quarters and the roof and such of the Project Fast Fish, it started spraying really, really good and then got to like this narrow, small paintball kind of spray, which is typically consistent with what you get when you do say like a thicker material like sound deadener or what have you. Why? Well, because the epoxy primer is a thicker base. And I only had the cheap little HVLP spray gun I got from Harbor Freight many, many years ago, and it's got like a 1.4 head on it, which is fine. So what I decided to do was said, hey, Mike, cleaning that thing has become a pain in the tush. You're constantly having to clean cups out, which is messy. You got to make sure that the spraying fan, I don't know all the technical terms, but the nozzles and such are working fine. There's got to be a better solution. And without getting individual paint cans and paint nozzles and having to go through the process, I ran across the 3M paint application systems. They're PPS systems, which are used by pros and professional hobbyists. So I was like, yeah, this is going to be a great option. And the biggest selling point were two things: cleanliness, because it uses a separate can, alrighty, and liner if you want it to be. And the measuring can is nothing more than a separate can where you use the liners inside of it. And then look right here in this design. The design goes straight and flows straight into the nozzle, not the gun, and you can actually select different nozzles for the different kinds of paint you're using. So that if you're using the thicker high build stuff, you could use a 1.6 or a 1.8 nozzle, or go all the way up to 2.0 if you're using a thinned out, say, poly liner like Raptor liner or what have you. All right, so this is the Paint Pro System 2.0. PPS 2.0. So I got the kit, which comes with many tips inside, but it did not come with many 1.6 and 1.8 tips, so I went ahead and got those. I'm going to show more on that later, but I figured I'd give you guys a preview of that today. If you're wanting to order that, I'll leave you all the links down below on my description, and for anything I purchase on Amazon, you can find it there. So there we go. What we have here is the Paint Pro system, and I wanted to go into a little bit more details about how this is used. All right, so when you get your kit, and a little flaw I wanted to point out, this is the 1.0 gun, not the 2.0 gun. They sold me on the 2.0. Apparently, somebody returned it with the 1.0. Nobody saw it. Look, it's fine. I used it anyways. I didn't know about that until later, but it is what it is, okay? But with that in mind, here's what we got going on. When you get your kit, it comes with the stuff that I showed you before. What I want to do now is I want to briefly go over how it operates, and that way if you want to know more about it, for if you decide to get something like this or to get this system for your hobby, okay, or craft or project, you can get it. Alrighty. So real quick, let's go over how this is basically set up, okay? So you got it, when you get the kit, it comes with basically a canister, and this canister is empty because it holds the liner. It's basically a liner that you use like this. You basically can use the canister. It has markings on it, okay, that you could use to fill your cup up. Now, if you notice, the canister is printed on backwards, so you can line it up, put your liner in, and kind of read where it's at. All right, with the numbers there, great, fantastic. It's against a nice white background. You can see it. Against the dark, it doesn't really look good, right? But basically, you mix your paint, okay? So if you're doing 4-to-1, okay, you're going to mix it to, this is a 4-to-1-to-1, but let's just say you wanted to mix up to the point where you had 4, okay? You would go to 4 here, and then you would go to the 4 with your hardener on the last one. We'll talk about the hardener I use in just a minute. So if you're doing up to 4 here, you're going to go to 4, and then fill it to the 4 with the hardener. So your base and then your hardener. If you were to doing just a simple small amount, you could do the 1-to-1 or then the 5-to-5, whatever you wanted to. And that's if you're using 4-to-1. If you're using 2-to-1, same process here, right? Fill it up to the 2, go to the next 2, okay? And then if you're doing 2-to-1-to-1, you can do 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3. You get the idea. Really simple. Now, the cool thing is that with this liner, it makes it so much easier to clean up with. You don't have to worry about cleaning the paint cups with the cheaper cups and so on and so forth. So effectively, what you do is you pre-mix in the can. You can do it here or in a separate cup. I used a separate cup, that way it wasn't puncturing the liner, right? Then you put your top on it, okay? And your top should go and seal right within here. And believe you me, I made this mistake when I was painting earlier. I had a mess one, I'll show you that later, maybe. That basically you put the liner on, okay? And then, according to the guys at 3M, and I'll leave the links for the videos and such that I use, that way you can see, oh, hey, here's the actual information if you want to dive deeper into it. But basically, you put your paint in, you click it, and then you lock it into place. Then you want to verify that everything is sealed, okay, all the way around, and you're good to go. Now, when it comes time for your gun, okay, you're basically going to set your paint at your nozzle, right, to, well, spray with, okay? So your nozzle ends up like this. You pull your trigger back a little bit, okay, set your nozzle in, get it nice and snug. So you see how you have the little, it's hard to see on this camera because I know the camera doesn't zoom in very well and doesn't point out very well, but basically got your little, I'll use the term groove there and groove there. That's so you can set it, pull it out just a hair, and lock it. There you go. So again, just turn and lock, alrighty? And then you go ahead and you put it thusly with your paint in there, all right, and go. Now, basic setup is really, really easy, okay? What 3M recommends is taking your nozzles, all right, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, so you want to go ahead and tighten all the ways in, all the way till they stop out, or what they call bottom out, right? Basically goes all the way down. On the 1.0, you have these little indicators here, okay, that tells you where your base setting is at. On the 2.0, they made these like little dots or etches in it that you can see it. But basically on your top nozzle, you want to go 1.5 to 2. I go to 2, or I went to 2 initially. So you basically make it 2 full turns. All right, that's 1 turn, 2 turns. And then you do 3 turns on the bottom, 2.5 to 3 turns. All right, so that's 1, 2, and 3. Alrighty, and then what you want to do is you want to go to, say, like a plastic paperboard or a cardboard or what have you. With everything set in place, you go about that distance, all right, hands width, maybe a little bit longer because my hands are a little bit smaller than the average guys, right? Because I'm a shorter dude, all right? But basically, you hold it like this. I'll do it off camera there so you can kind of see it, all right? And then you hold it and spray. And you keep spraying until you start seeing some runs, all right? And then you're going to look at the overall pattern. How is the overall pattern? You're aiming for like this big, fat, stogie kind of shape, right? Where it's kind of like oval, all right? And then you want to see the runs kind of run down evenly across. That's your basic setup. Let's go ahead and see how things turned out here. And if you notice what I did here, I left a lot still in the epoxy primer, because I wanted to tape these off when I put the Herculiner or Raptor liner on there, the bed liner. All right, I'm going to use Raptor liner. I'll tell you more about that a little bit later on. But I wanted to basically isolate this area because that's where your tow hooks go. Okay, and I still wanted to leave it painted there, so I'll be able to tape that off. Same thing over here. Now, this is where the sway bar will go. We'll talk more about that when I get that installed, so I'll be able to tape that off here. And of course, I know these aren't perches, but this is basically where your, or shackles, but this is basically where the front of the leaf spring will be mounted. I didn't want to get any of the bed liner up in there. And of course, around where the emergency brake cables are ran there. Okay. Additionally, where the transmission cross member goes, of course, it'll go all the way up to the 2 holes here. But I went ahead and did this. And this is the original Basin Street Blue. And of course, I did the other side in here. Overall, I think it turned out really awesome. Again, we're eventually going to put some bed liner all up in this area right here, except for this spot right there. So I wanted to go with the single stage 2K. Because it is harder than your average spray or spray enamel, and it could handle the tools being used up there to make the adjustments and what have you, eventually when you get your brakes in there and such. But basically this turned out really, really good. And with the magic of YouTube, you can see, hey, we got the front addressed here. I haven't decided if I'm going to black those out yet. I'm going to do some thinking about that because that'll also mean blacking out the ones in the fenders. But for now, I went ahead and made that happen. I might see if there's like a peel and stick vinyl option. And then, of course, I did everything up here. Now, I know that the fender sits on these spots right here. But again, I just wanted to make sure that those were painted because that's how it would have been done from the factory. Now, this is a factory restoration. But think about why this is important to do this area, okay? If that's done from the factory, okay, and it's a harder paint, once you get your fenders on there and get them tight and secure, you still have good, solid foundation for that paint to sit on. Everything in here turned out really, really awesome. This is inside the fender well, and of course, inside the firewall and cowl turned out absolutely amazing. Over here, the other side of the inner apron turned out absolutely fantastic, and this is the Basin Street Blue. As we're continuing to do our walk around here, I want to tell you a little story and a note if you use Sherwin-Williams paints. Now, if you go to a vendor that uses Sherwin-Williams paint codes and you ask for Basin Street Blue or what have you, B3 Blue, if you use the color code, I understand, yes, it's a marketing term, quote, quote, for the paint codes, but if you use the B3 Blue as coded in 1973, okay, you will actually get the B5 Blue, which they called the Tura Blue. Not True Blue, but Tura, T-U-R-E. And so you want to make sure you don't get that, alrighty? Now, additionally, when I was painting, I put the wrong color on here because I didn't, you know, when I opened the can up, I was like, well, maybe it'll lighten up a little bit or what have you. And I was like thinking, okay, we're good. Until I started painting with it, I'm like, that ain't lightening up, okay? And you'll notice that the first clip turned out to be incorrect. So yeah, that's when I first started putting it on, and I was like, that's not right. So it took some adjustments with the paint pros at my local paint shop. Thank you very much to Richardson Paint for hooking me up there. And yeah, came in with the mistake, and they wanted to make sure I was happy, and they made it right. So we got this thing mixed correctly after verifying codes and bringing in some samples and such. But again, I think for our basic cut-in, the single stage is absolutely what you want to use. Now, am I going to use the same single stage when it comes to the rest of the exterior? Well, more on that later. This is called the basic cut-in. Absolutely okay for the under apron areas on these rails here, the frame, if you will, the unibody, okay, on the firewall and such. In this side cowl area, absolutely okay to use it there, okay? But I think we're going to kick it up when it comes time for using it elsewhere. So I am super happy with the way that this turned out. In fact, in certain light elements, there's like a little teal color to it, which I think is kind of funny. Under a warm light, it looks more teal. But yeah, I think it is turning out fantastic, and I am super proud. On that note, this makes a great spot to go ahead and halt this video. Be on the lookout for the next video where I put Tintable Raptor liner and give this thing a shield against all elements. And don't forget, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.